Welcome to The Voice Versus. My guest today has been called the most controversial martial artist in history. His amazing story and the movie Bloodsport, based on his winning the Underground Kumite tournament, influenced an entire generation of martial artists and continues to do so today. What you're about to hear are truly amazing stories. Believe what you will. From undercover black ops to the realities of the Kumite, working with Jean-Claude Van Damme, influencing the early UFC, pioneering mixed martial arts, and much more. This is The Voice versus Frank Dux.
Sounds in the last round, all the lights flashing, crowds going crazy. Here comes The Voice. He's out of control, can't be stopped. Everyone knows that he's on top. The Voice. The Voice.
Frank Dux, welcome to The Voice Versus. It's an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure.
Just to clarify for our viewers, the reason you're wearing sunglasses, of course, is because due to the impact you took, the head trauma you took in your years of fighting, you suffered 2 brain tumours, and these days your eyes are very sensitive to light, correct?
Correct. That's actually very astute of you.
Let's talk a bit about Bloodsport up front. In an interview with Barbara Rich, when she asked how the movie Bloodsport has affected you personally, you said it's been a blessing and a curse. What did you mean by that?
Well, it sets you up for a lot of people in life. Basically, they want to tear you down. Bruce Lee, I think, said it best. When you get on top, you become sort of like the game of King of the Mountain. And that's what it is. I mean, a lot of people, even though they're successful in life, it's not enough that they're successful. They have to see everybody else fail. And someone like myself, when I made so many firsts in my life. I was the first person, for example, to buck the system and fight in bicycle shorts that I customized that everybody's using today. I was the first person to win the Kumite as far as being a Caucasian. And Bloodsport, like I said, it set me up as a target, but at the same time, it allowed me to be have opportunities and open doors I would never, ever possibly have in my life, especially when it comes to helping other people. And that's where I look at it as a blessing.
You mentioned Bruce Lee. Mm-hmm. Joseph Cinder, who was the advertising and publicity director for Warner Brothers between 1968 and 71, said in a July 2002 interview that Bruce Lee had heard how fast you were as a martial artist and wanted to meet you. Is that true back when you were a teenager? Did you ever hear back then of Bruce Lee knowing who you were and knowing how fast you were?
Yeah, well, here's a funny story behind that. I didn't have money to pay for lessons. So I would go to Bill Riasaki's school in Lancashire Boulevard, and I would go to the Chinese store next door, and I would actually work to get the broom and the pail and the cleaning supplies. Then I would go to Bill Riasaki's school, and I would clean the windows and the sidewalk. Nothing ever spoken between us. And Bruce Lee would come in there, and they were friends. And Bill would watch me in the window, watch me work out. He would see me at tournaments. He would see what I was doing. And he would always nail Bruce about, you're not that quick, And then on top of that, here's the other thing. There's a lot of people tell this story where Bruce Lee beat Victor Moore in a contest of speed, okay? And it's actually the other way around. Vic beat Lee in that contest.
So let me jump in there, Frank. Victor Moore, of course, a former USKA, PKA World Karate Champion. Mm-hmm. You fought Victor Moore in his heyday. He said that you were, and I quote Victor here, faster than all of us back then, including Bruce Lee. I told everyone this was the up-and-comer to watch.
Correct. Absolutely.
So you saw Bruce Lee train?
I saw him as a kid, yeah.
How fast was he, in your opinion?
I mean, he was lightning fast, but I was kind of a freak of nature, and I ended up with an extraordinary amount of what called fast twitch muscle fiber. And so, I did a bet once with a guy where they actually had a snake and it latched at me, and I actually caught it. And I used to do the fish thing too. You see in Bloodsport. In fact, I did it here in Las Vegas one time. It was a funny story. I was in I think it was the Hilton, they had a koi pond or something. Some guy said, "Oh, I don't believe you're Frank Dux. If you're Frank Dux, get that fish." And I did, of course, and handed it to him. And of course, the manager wasn't too happy because I understand it was like a $4,000 fish.
Tell me about your instructor, Senzo Tanaka. I mean, in the movie Bloodsport, we see the character Frank Dux being pulled between bamboo trees, being hit repeatedly with a stick, being blindfolded, doing a tea ceremony. Some pretty intense training. Was any of that true?
Absolutely. In fact, we actually, when I had a hold of Jean-Claude, I trained him for 3 months before we did the movie. And that scene where you see him being stretched, that's real.
Really?
That's real. People thought that was like all staged, but he actually did that to his credit. He actually got out there. They were stretching him. He was between those posts, and he actually pulls himself in and really does it. And that's one of the reasons I think it rang through, and you never saw that in the movie. Because if you look, there's no wiring in those days. There's no way to do it that way. We didn't have the, capability to digitally take things out.
How true are the techniques that Jean-Claude uses in the movie to the techniques you actually use to win the Kumite?
Well, they're pretty correct, right down to like what happened with my eye. When I actually fought, a lot of guys use dit dao, and it'll come up in your sweat. Now, I choose to believe that it wasn't intentional, that he actually took the dit dao from his sweat and flicked it into my eye, just coming off the
That
punch.
was in the final match, like in the movie?
Exactly. And I think, now,
which I should say is not an uncommon occurrence for those thinking that it's BS, because of course Liston did it to Muhammad Ali.
Right.
In K1, Jerome Lebana did it to Mark Hunt. It actually happens more than you'd think in fighting.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I was trained blindfold. My instructor made sure I trained blindfold just for that reason, because you can't have your eyes taken away that quickly. And so that really happened. Now, Lawrence Day, who was in my corner, from the Black Dragons and watched it, he insists, and he told, I think it was Barrett Mills, that basically that was intentional. He saw that was intentional. It was how they did that. But I fought on and, of course, won that. And, of course, the helicopter kick Jean-Claude does, there's pictures of me doing the exact same kick.
How true was Bloodsport a depiction of the actual competitors who took place in the Kumite? For example, was there a real-life Jackson?
Oh, yeah. In fact, Jackson's actually a composite of two people. It was a composite of Kurt Peterson, who was a very famous Kyoko Shinkai black belt. He was actually pretty famous for, I think he was the one who broke Dolph Lundgren's jaw when they fought to go to the match, I think Masayama's match in Japan, and another guy named Rick Robinson.
Was there a real-life Chong Li?
Oh, yeah.
Did Chong Li ever kill a man in the competition like is depicted in the movie?
Oh, yeah. It happened quite a bit. And people don't understand that. And that
Hold on, Frank. It happened quite a bit with Chong Li or with other competitors, or mostly with Chong Li?
A lot with Chong Li, actually.
Did you ever get to see?
Yeah, actually I did.
How did you see him kill a man?
Well, it wasn't deliberate. Again, what happened was, you have to understand, that time you had a concussion, you were told to man up. And these poor guys back then, very rarely Kumite fighters lived beyond the age of 30 to 40 years old. I was very lucky. I probably survived because I was known for very quick knockouts. And I really didn't take the abuse a lot of these guys did. But the majority of these guys, what they would do is, this is their bread and butter, and they were owned. Literally, the gym would own them. And a guy would he'd get knocked out, and he let's say on a Tuesday, and he's back Thursday fighting again. He might get knocked down Thursday, and he's back again. Guess what? Sunday, maybe he wins that match, and maybe wins 4 more. Then they put him in a kumite. He gets one hit, it's all over.
How did you witness Chong Li kill someone? What technique was used? How did it come about?
Oh man, you put a choke on the guy, and then basically what happened is the guy fought from the choke, and he gave him just one shot to the temple here, and the guy went down. He was out, but he didn't die in the ring. He died that later that night. I mean,
you're 19 years old when you saw this?
Yeah, I was 19.
Did that scare you, knowing you're in a tournament where, I mean, you fought people like Victor Moore, but you've seen tournaments like in Long Beach where there's a lot of rules to it, and here you see a guy, this Chong Li guy, kill someone in front of you. You're 19 years old.
Well, you got to remember, he didn't die in front of me. He died.
But you would have gotten word that he died that night.
Of course. And it was very different then. Our fights were different. We had a certain respect. You didn't fight for money then. You were certainly fighting for fame, because they weren't really publicized. It was all about really learning. It was all about taking your technique of your style and seeing if it really worked. It was really more of a contest of pride amongst martial arts. It was a very different mindset than the mindset today. You know, today most guys fight for a way to assert their manhood. It's sort of a rite of passage for them. Where in our day it was more along the lines of, no, I want to honor my instructor. I want to honor my ancestry. I want to honor my lineage for a lot of people. And that's why they got out there and did what they did.
How did you defeat Chong Li?
Whoa. Well, there's a number of ways. I think the best defeat I ever gave with Chong Li was...
Hold on, you fought Chong Li more than once?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get specific though, Frank. Your final match,
Yeah.
when you won the Kumite in the Bahamas, how did you specifically beat Chong Li? Did you knock him out with a kick, a punch? Did you choke him? How did you beat him? Did you make him say mate like in the movie?
I made him say mate like in the movie.
How?
I was a really good grappler. I started off in jiu-jitsu. That's where I trained with Jack Secchi. And so once I knew I got him in that position, then it was all over. So I basically submitted him out.
One of the most remembered parts of the film is obviously when the Frank Dux character does the dimmak, the
Yeah.
death touch. Were you actually required to do that in real life to prove yourself? Did you perform a dimmak? Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, I've done it a number of times on television. Where I do the break the bottom break, leave the top one intact. It's what it is. It's really a controlled kinetic energy break.
Could you punch me now, and I wouldn't feel the effect of it, but in a few hours' time I would
Oh yeah.
drop dead?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you'd be in a hospital. Let's put it that way. It'd probably be your heart valve coming loose.
Wow. What about the quarter snatching trick we see in Bloodsport? Real?
Very real. In fact, I was inspired to do that by hearing about Bruce Lee doing it. And so he would do the same thing, and I learned to do it. And I'm happy to do it for you if you want.
Really?
Really, I'll do it right now.
Okay, I've got a quarter here.
All right.
So I'm placing it in my hand.
Right,
Now the aim is for me to close my hand before you can snatch the quarter.
right. Just open your hand. You ready?
Quick.
Do it again.
Jeez. Quick. Hey, I did the coin trick with Frank Dux. That's pretty cool. Up next on The Voice Versus.
I really loved Jean-Claude as a person. I watched this addiction and the people around him taking him down.
Let's talk about someone else.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme and your relationship with Jean-Claude. You did train with him for 3 months in preparation for Bloodsport.
Yeah.
When you first started training with Jean-Claude, what level of martial artist was he, and what were you able to accomplish with him in those 3 months?
He was very stiff. He was from a Shotokan background, that was obvious. He did some kickboxing. He was, at the same time, he had a plus. He did ballet, very stretched. He approached it from a dancer's point of view, and he was learning the movements from a dancer doing choreography. Now that's not to take anything away from him. I can tell you when I trained him, he could fight.
Were you surprised at how short in stature Jean-Claude is? I know when I met Jean-Claude for the first time, I was surprised that I mean, you're a big guy, Frank, and for him to depict you in the film, given his stature, Jean-Claude is nowhere near as big as you.
No, but what got him the part is basically this, and that is, I'd gone to see a film, actually it was Sheldon Lettich, who wrote Bloodsport, called me up and he says, Frank, I just saw an advertisement and you're not going to believe it, this guy looks just like you, and he's in this movie called No Retreat, No Surrender. So we go see the movie, and then I realized, I said, you know, Mark, I talked to Mark DeSalle, I said, Mark, if you're going to shoot in Hong Kong, I said, where are you going to find anybody to play my size? All the guys are heavyweights. And I had to fight to get Jean-Claude that part. And that was part of the deal. Okay, he trains with you for 3 months to look like you, and I said, look, I can make him look fantastic. But what really makes Bloodsport come alive is people go back and they see that film over and over again because of the reality of it. They recognize the reality in the choreography. And that's not something that's easily duplicated. I think a lot of people take it for granted. That's why Bloodsport 2 never went anywhere. You know, it doesn't have my style of choreography. Same thing with Jean-Claude. When I stopped doing his choreography, where did it go?
You once said that Jean-Claude was industrious in the early days, but then got caught up in the Hollywood lifestyle and it destroyed him. Do you still believe that?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember you couldn't give him an aspirin, all right? He was totally against steroids. He was just a hardworking kid. He just affable, he couldn't believe. But the people he started to surround himself with just started pumping him up, and he became a victim of, I honestly believe he became a victim of too many temptations, opportunity.
In 1988, you sued Jean-Claude. Now, you were friends with Jean-Claude. You were even dating his sister-in-law.
Yeah, I loved Denise.
So what were the circumstances that led you to sue Jean-Claude?
Oh gosh, I really loved Jean-Claude as a person. I watched I watched this addiction and the people around him taking him down. And there's a thing, if you really love someone, if you do things in life, you have to, what I call, risk the relationship. And so what I did is basically I made him accountable. Nobody sues a person like him in Hollywood. You just don't do it. It's the end of your career. And people say it's the money. What was the money? I would have taken the settlement. You know, I offered him a counter settlement. One, you have to go see your kids. Two, you have to go through complete a drug addiction program. That was my thing for him. People don't ever talk about that part. And I think that's because the attorneys actually hid that from him on both sides, because they're after the money.
You were actually suing him, though, to do with the Quest?
To the Quest. Basically what happened is I wrote the Quest with a guy named Ed Kamara. Sheldon Lettich comes in afterwards along with these other guys. They basically take my whole script, paraphrase it, you know, instead of like I had a balloon, they put in blimp, or, you know, bar, saloon. That's how ridiculous it got. They took an A script that would have been a really serious film for Jean-Claude and literally turned it into this, you know, let's make a quick buck, you know, prepay kind of deal for the producers. So here I wrote this thing, and the next thing you know, my name's not on it. I was supposed to choreograph it. I'm not doing it. I'll never forget it. I was on the stand, and I was talking about the money, and I started crying because it wasn't the money. It was really about, here's my friend, and he couldn't stay in the courtroom after that. The judge let him out of the courtroom, and I think he did a tremendous disservice, because all I was asking is like, who goes to court and says to the other guy, just go to counseling. That's all I want you to do. This is over. Done. And it didn't happen. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And I'm bringing this all up not because of like, poor woe is me. I don't want anybody to think that. I want them to understand how hard a battle it was for me with all the evidence on my side. I mean, I wrote the script. That's, you know, it's there, it's done. What was Jean-Claude going up against? That's what I want people to understand. You know, a lot of people are really quick to condemn the guy. They're really quick to say, oh, you know, he's this, that. He didn't have a chance. I mean, I really, my heart goes out to him. It really does, because I really saw a guy come to Hollywood with dreams, sell it all, put his heart into it, and then I watched this thing eat him up, and some real evil people, you know, just take it. And I'm a fighter. I'm going to fight. You know? And I fought a battle I know I couldn't win. You want to condemn me for that? Go ahead. But at least, hey, I keep my integrity. You know, you take an attitude if you're a true martial artist. And the attitude isn't about whether you're going to win the battle or not. It's about how you live your life. You define your life by the way you live it. And it's a practice the samurai call Mushin, dead or ready. And I've always had that attitude. And that's probably why you asked me a question earlier. I was afraid and all this. Yeah, but I also was trained by some of the greatest guys in the world, Tanaka for one, who instilled that in me. You know, and that's something that's missing in these MMA guys. They go out and it's all a lot of times it's all about ego. You know, and that'll kill you. That's the predator of all relationships, all things.
Coming up on The Voice Versus.
They basically looked at me as cannon fodder. They all thought, you know, the Orientals who brought me over thought, there's just no way. The guy has no real lineage. He, you know, how is this guy going to beat us?
Let's talk about the kumite.
Yeah.
1975.
Right.
You're age 19. You compete in an underground kumite tournament, not in Hong Kong as depicted in the movie, but in Nassau in the Bahamas.
Right.
How was it that a 19-year-old white Canadian got invited to compete in this underground kumite in the Bahamas?
I originally wasn't supposed to even go. It was supposed to be John Keane who was supposed to go, who's one of the Black Dragons. But John had died in May that year. I'd actually left for the Marine Corps, and I had come back. I didn't have time to prepare. And in November '75, I got a call and said, "Look, we need a Black Dragon in the event, to represent us." And so I ended up, being selected to in the invitation and go. And they basically looked at me as cannon fodder. They all thought, the Orientals who brought me over thought, "There's just no way. The guy has no real lineage. How is this guy going to beat us?" And of course, history has shown a totally different story.
How did this guy beat them? How did you win the kumite? Take me through the process of becoming the kumite champion.
Well, in those days, you had to understand it was a totally different mindset. For example, weightlifting was considered a negative in those days. They thought it slowed you down. Cross training was looked down upon. It was all about purity, just this Koru attitude that if you really understand your martial art, your karate, that's all you need to understand. Everything was contained within it. And I came from a standpoint of not being formally trained. And what really, I think, made it decisive for me is the fact that I learned through observation. And I started to learn patterns and see things like I decided and I figured it out. There's only 12 angles of attack. I don't care whatever you do. There's only 12 angles of attack, and every angle of attack has a corresponding angle of evasion. And by learning how to mix the evasion with the angle of attack, really understanding it as a science, approaching it from a totally different point of view, what I ended up doing is I ended up bypassing the amygdala in my brain. So where the amygdala is where you have hesitancy, where fear kind of breaks in. And I started making everything more about autonomic reactions. For example, if someone knocks a cup off the table, people automatically go boom. They don't think about, oh, catch the cup, right? They do it. It's the same reaction. And that became key to me winning, because all of a sudden I was faster than the guys. So I got to the point where I could read my opponent, and I read him so well. I could go into the ring. I did this with Bob Sapp, for example. I walked in the Bob Sapp fight in Tacoma. I predicted 57 seconds the guy's going to go down. He went down in 56. All right, I did it for a show, for the documentary Put Up Your Dukes, for example. They took me into Hooters for the Randy Couture fight in Brock Lesnar. And you can see me arguing with one of the guys there. Said, he's not going down the first round. He's going down 1 minute and 30 seconds inside the second. Because I could see, I knew exactly when, there's a thing I call the triangle of force. It's another principle I have. And I know exactly when Randy would always give that up. And I knew how Brock fought. It's just a matter of really having the information and making things work on a scientific point of view. And that's what really worked for me. Plus, back then, in addition to the training, I mean, they didn't never trained against a left hook, and I was famous for a liver shot. Years later, I showed that to a guy in Holland. He showed it to another guy. The guy hit Bas Rutten. He went down, and now that became his signature. His signature hit. So every time he was hitting people in the liver shot, I just kind of laugh and go, I wonder if he ever realized the role I played in that,
How many opponents did you actually beat to win the kumite, and how long did the kumite go for?
They're all different, because sometimes you'd go for, it was different. It wasn't like sanctioned. So, it depends on where you were. Now, one kumite match I'm famous for, it was 56, it's 60 bouts, basically. But it's spread over 18 months. Kumites happened every once in a while where you saw it was kind of that tournament style. But for the most part, the way I accumulated 329 wins is they, you'd go to a city, you have a promoter, and they'd find like 4 or 5 tough guys, essentially. And you'd fight them. It's more like what you see Kimbo Slice. You see these
backyard fights he used to have?
Backyard fights. That's basically what it was. And that's how I accumulated so many wins. And then a lot of these guys, they didn't really have a chance against me. Honestly, and again, you have to understand, I'm growing up in an age where you have no information. Guys never saw, some of the maneuvers I was using, you know, it's almost like the early days of the UFC. You know, people who weren't prepared for the grappling they were a victim of it.
Yeah.
They were totally taken down. And that's what the Gracies were betting on, that lack of information. But as what happened as time went on, more people got into the grappling, they became more rounded, whole different fight culture.
Up next on The Voice Versus.
Do you think that the UFC, which was established in 1993, was inspired in a large part by your accomplishments?
I know it was.
How would a 19-year-old Frank Dux, just having won the Kumite, have fared against current UFC fighters, Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman, any of the current UFC fighters?
Well, it's you know, you're comparing apples and oranges. You know, I don't want to be disrespectful to them. In many ways, we had it harder because we're fighting with no gloves. The rules are a little bit harsher, but at the same time, these young men and they have a greater obstacle, and the obstacle was this: you're living in an age of information overload. The reason we had the Kumite and where this all came about, it's really ironic. It was about getting information. You couldn't get information. You couldn't pull the secrets out of people. Well, what's your style about? That's why we used to have these challenges. That's why people don't understand about the Kumite. It wasn't about, again, asserting your identity as a man. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about money. It was about learning. It's the only way you're going to pull something out. We didn't have internet. We didn't have video. You know, Black Belt Magazine was a joke. I mean, come on, you know. So, where are you going to go?
Do you think that the UFC, which was established in 1993, was inspired in a large part by your accomplishments?
I know it was. I mean, the first thing, it was called the Ultimate Fight Challenge. I was known by Victor Moore as the Ultimate Fighter or the Ultimate Fight Champion. Nobody could beat me. I retired undefeated. I mean, truly undefeated. There are a lot of guys running around saying they have undefeated records in my era. I won't mention their names, but I can name 4 or 5 people who beat them. Okay? They ended up for a year, Art Davies, before that fight came, contacts me. I'm 13 years retired, and they're trying to challenge me to fight in this thing.
In the first UFC?
First UFC. Okay? And they're going to call it, to honor me, the way the representative talked to me, they're going to call it the Ultimate Fight Challenge.
So would that, just to jump in there, would that lead us to believe then that the first UFC was originally planned as a testament and planned around you, rather than being a plan of the publicity of the Gracie family?
No, it's a combination of both. It's not one or the other. It was their, that was part of their whole, they were doing $100,000 challenges all the time.
Right.
You know? But the thing is, the reason they got that name, the reason, if you look at the format of it, it's all blood sport.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't think there were time limits. I don't think there was, everybody had from different styles, right? The rules were totally different. The only thing that made it uniquely theirs is they put it in a cage. And the appeal of it was, because it was a cage like that, was they were trying to market it sort of like wrestling. And so they were doing this Mau thing. And for a year, I had a guy, I won't mention his name, but for a year, this guy is doing this Mau thing to the point I had to get a restraining order on him, trying to get me in this fight. Finally go to the Draka Martial Art Festival. He does this whole wrestling Mau thing, gets a crowd around, let's fight. I finally said, look, if you really feel that way, there's a challenge, and we're going to take it right now, do it now.
The man you're talking about is Zane Frazier.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
It was at the Century City Plaza Hotel in Los Angeles, 1994. Go on.
Correct. Actually, it was 1993. They twist that date intentionally, by the way.
Okay. Because that would make sense, 93 before the UFC, just before the birth of UFC.
That's right. And that's why they try to say it's 94. It's 1993. Okay. And it's 3 to 6 months before that fight took place.
So tell me what happened that day, 1993, you and Zane Frazier.
It was really one of those WWE moments. I mean, you had to be there. Even the crowd started laughing at him at that point. He had to walk off. He comes back 20 minutes later, and I'm signing an autograph for this kid at the booth, and when we're just setting up. And Zane knows I'm blind out of this eye because of my injuries. And I hear my voice called out. Just as I turn, he hits me, clocks me with brass knuckles, hoping to drop me, and so he could say, knock
brass
me out.
knuckles?
Brass knuckles. And there's a medical report to prove it. You can even see 4 indentations, square indentations in my head, including to the skull. Oh. Now, for a year, I told you this guy's hounding me. And lo and behold, I got him contained. I got him on the ground. I locked him up. I'm just getting ready to put a triangle choke on him. And all of a sudden, I'm kicked in the back of the head. And next thing you know, I've got 5 other guys jumping in on me. And now I'm fighting him and 5 other guys. And they're UFC guys. By myself, 13 years retired, right?
Wow.
Still recovering with injuries, mind you, from 2 brain tumors, at the time. They couldn't handle me. Even recently, Sports Illustrated, they were called up and they asked me about this whole thing, doing a story on the 20-year anniversary. They were given where to find the court documents. They were given a declaration by my attorney. They're given statements by John Monty. You don't hear a thing. They just totally pigeonhole it and just give Zane Frazier's and Art Davies' account of it. Don't tell you anything of the backstory of how they were for a year trying to find me in this thing. And just say, oh, Frank Dux denies it, and then made up some kind of thing just to paint me in a bad light. And unfortunately, that's been what's really kind of been plaguing me for a lot of times. I got to a certain point of success, and because of other people's bad actions to cover it up and protect their brand, and that's what this is really all about, that I get pigeonholed.
Coming up on The Voice Versus.
One day I had a guy roll up in a Rolls Royce, and he threw $25,000 down on my table and says, I want you to go kill the guy down the street.
To clarify, the man down the street is Steven Seagal. Frank, let's talk some of your espionage work. You never claimed to be a card-carrying CIA member.
Yeah, correct.
But you did covert work for the CIA during a time when America, as you say, was involved in 5 secret wars. What wars were they, and how did you become involved with the CIA?
Well, first of all, I didn't work for the CIA, and I want to make this real clear, okay? Any involvement I had with them was tangentially by dealing with people who were in the agency, like William Casey. But the person I actually worked with was Robert Ames Mayhew. And Mayhew, those who don't know history, he was the alter ego to Howard Hughes' empire. He also was involved in the planning of the Bay of Pigs. He was the station chief for the FBI of Seattle, Washington. I really fell under the order, my chain of command was actually the National Command Authority, which went to the president. And my job was really more of internal affairs at one point, where it was really just looking into making sure guys weren't using the color of authority in what they were doing. And then later on, as I did that, I found out of a plot, if you would, to take us to war with Iran and Iraq, which happened under the guise of weapons of mass destruction. That was in my book.
While we're talking about your book, I have it here, and I actually read it in 2 days. It reads like a Bourne novel, a Ludlum novel. It's incredible. But I do want to ask, you wrote the book while on your deathbed. Well, does it mean that maybe you embellished any of the stories, knowing that you probably weren't going to be alive to see it get published?
Well, no. Here, first of all, I want to make something very clear. Okay, the book was assembled by a guy named Scott Davison from my notes. I was very ill at the time. I kind of lost my voice in it, if you will. There were so many editors involved in the process. It was like too many, cooks in the kitchen. But the book was very powerful. I mean, the CIA came out and gave a formal, denial. Hadn't done that since...
Which is the only time that's happened.
Yep.
20 book.
Yeah.
A lot of great stories in the book. A lot of crazy stories in the book. Part of the book, you talk about your dealings with a Serbian outlaw named Ljubo Magas.
Yeah.
You wrote, and I quote again, "He had seen me fight under circumstances in which savagery was necessary for survival." Can you describe one of these incidents of savagery in your fighting that Ljubo Magas might have seen?
We fought in an ice rink, and I remember pounding a guy's head into the ice. So he was just so big and so strong that I literally cracked his head open because it was allowed. It was you got to understand, it's a different era.
Who was Vojo Goric?
Oh, Vojo, I love Vojo.
Tell me about him.
Probably the most fierce man I ever met in my life.
What made him so fierce?
He was an anomaly. I mean, Vojo was the guy, if you ever see the movie Rambo 2, okay, he's the guy who Sly Stallone fights in the helicopter, okay? What people don't know about that fight scene is Vojo was yelling at Stallone, "Hit me, what are you, a girl? Hit me." Because he didn't understand you could pull punches in the movies. He was expecting him to really hit him, so he would hit Sly, you know?
These are characters you met doing espionage work overseas.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Who was Fedor Duchovny?
That was me. That was me.
An alias of yours?
Yeah.
You ever killed a man?
It's not a question I care to answer. Let's put it this way, it's not a very civilized question.
When I interviewed Steven Seagal for this show, speaking to him the night before the interview, and he said there were several things he didn't want to be asked about, and one of them was his covert work for the CIA. From your dealings with people in the CIA, do you believe there's any truth that Steven Seagal was involved in covert operations for the CIA?
Well, I do know for a fact a couple of guys who actually worked with Steven, but not in the way that I think people portray it. Steven's a very real guy, and I get upset when people try to paint him a certain way. For example, there's a reason the guy runs around with tote bags full of guns and his things. He lived a certain life. He mixed with the wrong people. I mean, he deserves to be able to have those kind of weapons at his fingertips, because you have to get permission to do that. You can't just walk around with that, obviously. No, these threats are very real.
I got on really well with Steven. He was a fantastic guy, polite to me, and I'm intrigued. How did you first come to meet Steven Seagal?
Well, we had schools competing with each other, actually, down the street from each other. But one day I had a guy roll up in a Rolls Royce, and he threw $25,000 down on my table and says, "I want you to go kill the guy down the street. I understand you." And he knew me this guy knew me as an operator. He didn't know me as a martial artist. He knew me, he thought, because I had worked undercover, he knew my undercover identity.
To clarify, the man down the street is Steven Seagal. This guy wanted you to take out Steven Seagal.
Take out Steven Seagal. So first thing I did is check with my handler how to handle the situation. I said, "Well, immediately go over there and warn the guy." He says, "Well, just keep it that way and just turn down the money." You know what I mean? And I ended up rolling over there. It was me and a guy named Bear Trap Smith. And Bear Trap was a student of mine, and you have to understand, ex-Green Beret. It was one of Elvis Presley's bodyguards. He's the one who went to jail for hitting a guy with a pistol. And I mean, the guy was close to almost 500 pounds. I mean, he was a beast. Steven wasn't sure if I was there to hurt him or not, because he took a look at Bear Trap. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I only brought Bear Trap because he was there, because he had witnessed it. So I didn't want him to think I was making something up. I said, "Look, you need to take some precautions." And so he said, he shook my hand. He says, "Not too many people have the balls to turn down the money and come see me. I mean, because you always put yourself in the line of fire here." I go, "Hey, man, it's the right thing to do, And we had a mutual respect from that day on.
In 1993, you were diagnosed with a brain tumor. By 1994, as a result of complications of brain surgery and spinal meningitis, you were left comatose on your deathbed, given a 1 out of 10,000 chance of survival. Did your fight career or any of the situations you came across in your espionage work more so contribute to that condition?
All of the above. All of it. I had the fight career initially created the injury, but it was being exposed to nerve toxins or special toxins that actually exacerbate it.
In an interview you once said, and I quote again, This is you talking about the Kumite in the Bahamas. My involvement in that tournament was part of a plan launched in 1975 to infiltrate the criminal organizations that organized the fights.
It wasn't planned per se. It was just, I was moving in those circles. That's one of the reasons why I was recruited. You know, people don't understand the whole martial art industry, especially back in those days. I mean, they ran hand in hand with the criminal enterprises. I mean, if you're learning Hung Gar Kung Fu, it was Tong who taught it. And so if you're moving that kind of circle, you're going to get approached by people who are trying to gather intelligence for a living. And so, yeah, I was asked to go look into things, and that's how I ended up getting sucked into this world.
Up next on The Voice Versus.
I started to realize what it was all about. And it was really about, you know, manipulation of perception, racketeering, and racism in the martial arts. It's one of the reasons I'm writing a book. It's called Ninjas Are Bullshit.
I want to ask you some true or false questions. True or false? You once sold a ceremonial sword that you won in the Kumite to attempt to buy the freedom of enslaved children.
That's true. There was a practice in the Philippines called Muraami. And they were taking children, and it was child exploitation labor. And they'd have these fishing vessels, and what happened is the parents would sign the kids in thinking they would come back at the end of the year making $1.25, you know, a day. $400 is a good annual salary in that part of the world, but they're charging them $3 a day to live. So the kids are indentured slaves at the end of it because parents can't read what they signed. And here's the thing that broke my heart. No sooner I get these kids out of the contract, and I'm talking like almost a shipload, that ship is refilled that quick. You know, and here I am trying to bring attention to this thing, and this, I don't have words to say with this journalist for trivializing this thing and playing it out. But here's the thing, 60 of them drowned. I was in a position, I knew it was only a matter of time. They drowned. And it wasn't until 60 kids drowned from those boats that they actually, the Philippine government was forced to finally do something to intervene.
The journalist you talk about, John Johnson.
Yeah.
So he wrote the LA Times editorial in 1988.
Yes.
Attempting to discredit you.
Yeah,
This is an article that is often quoted by Frank Dux haters around the world on the internet. Johnson was an acquaintance of your ex-wife,
right,
with whom you were engaged in a divorce at the time.
Right.
Do you believe that that was Johnson's motive for writing the piece, or was it, you know, something more sinister for that? What do you think was the motive behind doing this piece in the LA?
I have no idea what's another person's mind. I walked into the LA Times before that article was ever printed with all the proof. I had my fight tapes with me. I came with my attorney. The editor of the magazine, and this is why it might be a little more sinister than that, the editor of the magazine, the LA Times, took me aside and said to me, look, there's nothing you can do. And they used the name North, Oliver North, because I was scheduled, I didn't realize it, to testify in a Iraq Contra, and what I would have said would have impeached his testimony. Of course, his testimony was eventually impeached, and everyone knows Oliver North went to jail.
True or false, you once threatened to throw Jean-Claude Van Damme off a building top?
True.
True or false, Bolo Jung actually choked an actor unconscious on the set of Bloodsport?
True.
True or false, you were the first and maybe only Westerner to ever train and advise the Verkut, the top secret elite anti-terrorist unit of the Ukraine?
True.
True or false, you're named as a contributing source in the creation and compilation of the elite US Navy SEAL CFC Spec War Manual K431-0097 that's in use today by special forces and clandestine special ops groups worldwide?
True.
True or false, your military records were rewritten to eradicate certain events and things in your records?
True.
True or false, you remain an active undercover off-the-books employee of the CIA?
That's a very good question.
True or false? You used to use a double to answer media interviews for you while you were clandestinely abroad. I hope I'm speaking to the real Frank Dux right now. True or false? You were once conferred the rank of a Soviet army captain.
True.
True or false? You appeared in the movie Highlander.
False.
Damn it! Great film.
Wish. That's false.
True or false? You hold a tug of war record where you stood on one leg and 66 people couldn't pull you down.
True. Did that in Zug, Switzerland. I actually did it again in the International Martial Art Festival. The Martial Art Expo in Mexico City. I did 100 people.
True or false? You've broken bulletproof glass with a single punch.
True. Although I have to say they call it bullet-resistant glass.
Hallie Warden once called you, and I quote, probably the most controversial exponent in the history of martial arts. How does that make you feel?
I get a little angry at it for one reason, because controversy is not the right word. Controversy sometimes establishes that there's maybe some truth behind it. And the truth of the matter is I'm probably the most pigeonholed martial artist because I didn't fit the mold that these certain people wanted. I was a threat to their economic gain. I started to realize what it was all about. And it was really about, manipulation of perception, racketeering, and racism in the martial arts. It's one of the reasons I'm writing a book. It's called Ninjas Are Bullshit. There's no evidence to support the ninjutsu as a martial art. There's any historical evidence. Ninjutsu is nothing more than an umbrella word like walking. And it's not even a title or a position. It is a job description. I was bringing light to that in the 1980s, and this was a major moneymaker for the magazines. And I'm raining on their parade. You darn right they pigeonholed me. I couldn't advertise in the magazine. I'm not allowed. There's contractual arrangements between the guys who are saying they're ninjas and selling ninjutsu self-defense manuals. And it's a huge, huge consumer fraud. And I'm the one who's being called a fraud when I'm the one who actually knew the truth, and I was fighting for people so they weren't being taken advantage of.
1994 seemed to be the worst year of your life.
Yeah.
You were assaulted, as we mentioned earlier, at the Drucker Martial Arts Festival by Zane Frazier. You were diagnosed as having 2 brain tumours.
Actually, it was 93.
93?
Yeah. But
so let's go 93, 94 period was the worst period of your life.
Yeah.
Assaulted by Zane Frazier, diagnosed as having 2 brain tumours, then as having meningitis.
Yes.
You had a facial neurome, which meant you had to have some of the muscles in your face cut. The Northridge earthquake destroyed your home.
Right.
You ended up in a coma. Your wife left you.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard of anyone having a worse year than you did between 93 and 94. How do you get through something like that?
Well, again, remember I told you having that mindset. If you don't have the mindset like you're dead already, like I was telling you about, you'll internalize everything. And that's I was very blessed by some great men who saw some real hardships in their life, who had to overcome what you might call insurmountable odds, and they survived by having that attitude. And that's the way you survive it. You have to function. I function along the lines of trying to serve my higher purpose. And so no matter what a person does to me, whatever, I just look at it as, okay, it's a roadblock to getting to where I need to go. But that's what defines us as human beings. That's what, probably why people still talk about me to this day. I don't go looking for it. I don't have a PR agent. Probably if I did, I'd probably be super rich or something, but I just do the best I can. I mean, one of the things I always found really kind of weird is I would be accused of exploiting ninjutsu or, doing things, and I don't even charge for the lessons. If you talk to the majority of people who train with me, I went into the poor neighborhoods. I went to Mexico. I could have opened up in Beverly Hills right after Bloodsport. I could have sold DVDs and home instructional courses and done the whole 9 yards. Why didn't I do it? You know, because I was really focused on my higher purpose. I was really focused on something else. And when you do that, that's richness. That's real richness. And that's why I've been able, many times in my life, to face death straight away. I had a very blessed life because I grew up in an era, and I feel sorry for these guys, but I grew up in the Valley of the Champions, where the greatest martial art legends of all time, and I doubt we'll ever see that in history again, because there was no internet and this stuff. They all gathered. I mean, if you can imagine this, within a 5-mile radius, you had 20, 30 world champions, all bigger than life. And I'm growing up with this. And I'm going from school to school to school and being able to watch them and hear them and see things that they didn't even see in themselves and be able to put that together and form my own style. You know, how can you top that?
Frank Dux, thank you for joining me on The Voice Versus. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
To the last round, all the lights flashing, crowds going crazy. Here comes the voice. He's out of control, can't be stopped. Everyone knows that he's on top. The voice. The voice.
Everybody listen up, can you feel the beat? Yeah.